I've had a chance to work and co-present with Melissa, especially this last year and at TDX as well. So that was good. Like she asked me to come and sort of talk to you guys about data cloud, but more from an architect lens. So again, thanks for making the time. We'll do intros then. I'm part of Salesforce, so I have to have a forward-looking statement slide here. Just make any of the decisions based on capabilities that we have GA today. I do want to say thank you for investing in Salesforce, as well as if you're not heard, Data Cloud is one of our fastest growing products, and it's thanks to Trailblazers and a broader ecosystem like yourself. So here's the sort of the overall high-level agenda. I'll give you an overview as well as how it works, talk about the technical architecture, what some of those best practices are, as well as what's the path to become a data cloud architect. A bit of myself, so I'm part of Salesforce. I'm in our partner product success team, and I've been sort of working on data cloud for the last 3 years. So we are a hybrid between our product team and our broader ecosystem of partners. And in terms of how do we enable our broader ecosystem on all things Salesforce, and my focus has been on data cloud. So just to kind of set the stage, right? We launched our Einstein One platform back at back in early March at sort of TDX, right? It's a trusted AI platform for every company. It gives you a unified customer profile, a unified metadata, sort of low code and automation. But if you kind of feel this is sort of what we call as the trusted AI architecture, and there are basically three different layers to it. One is you have your data layer, which is covered by data cloud. Second is you have all your models that live on top of it. They can be, you can bring your own models through, our partnership with SageMaker, Google Vertex. You can also bring your own LLM models as well. And then we apply something called as grounding to that, trust layer, and that's how your AI is not like doesn't hallucinate, right? And then on top of that is where we also have our Einstein One Studio, which is both for pro code as well as no code to be able to build very prescriptive models. And on top of it is, you have your apps and your workflows, basically your UI layer from your Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud. But a key tenet in terms of what is going to feed a lot of that is going to be your data layer, which is powered by Data Cloud, right? So what is Data Cloud? If you're not, just going to give you an overview. Sort of Data Cloud is our Salesforce's hyperscale data engine that's sort of built right into Salesforce. It lets you basically federate, connect, know your customers. It lets you act on your data as well as AI in the flow of work. And then it also has a very open access and the ecosystem to kind of bring, any of your cloud data lakes from other hyperscalers as well. And then really sort of like I would say, this is Data Cloud covers the Einstein One platform and really helps you unlock your data, right? And then I just want to Data Cloud is very deeply integrated into the Salesforce One platform and into the Einstein One platform. So, on here you see a before and after Data Cloud. So your end users, your business users are still working in CRM in their flow of work, but now powered by Data Cloud, they just have so much more richer access to data. So before we set the stage, let's kind of talk about how Data Cloud works. I'm not sure how many of you have seen this slide before. This kind of talks to you. So maybe let's sort of step through in the day of customer data. So at first is Data Cloud can plug into any to bring data in from your different source systems. So we have standard out of the box connectors to all the Salesforce clouds. We have connectors to even the hyperscalers like your S3 bucket, Google Cloud Storage, Azure. We have from getting data from your website, mobile, and Web SDK. We also have a MuleSoft connector to be able to plug into any of your on-premise or other legacy systems. And then we also have, connectors for CRM. And then really exciting is now you don't even have to bring that data in, so something that we call as bring your own lake. So if you are working with a Snowflake, Databricks, Redshift, right? So that data through our zero copy framework, which is really sort of has really become very popular now in the industry, that data can still live in your source systems and be accessed by data cloud. And then once you connect to your source systems, as I said, we have out of the box connectors, and then we give you some transformation capabilities from our streaming transforms, batch transforms. We also have standard data bundles in terms of how do you map that uh, data. And then so once you are able to, so you're connect to your source systems, and then you are bringing that in. And then this is where the power of data cloud comes in, what we call as harmonize. And you may have heard this term, and harmonization like might mean different things to different, but at a very high level, it's like how do you map all this data that's coming in into a standard, centralized, what we call as a customer 360 data model. And why is that important? As you know, like even within your, if you have different Salesforce clouds, I'm called as a contact in my CRM, subscriber and marketing cloud, profile and commerce cloud. If I'm coming from your e-commerce system, I could be a customer. So the data that comes in different shapes, formats, naming syntaxes, how do you map it to a very centralized data model? And once you have that harmonized model, you can start to unify it. And what we mean by unify is what we call as something called identity resolution, where based on either prescriptive logic or some fuzzy logic, you can start to unify your individuals, as well as now we also unify accounts as well. So it can be like unify on a contact on like email plus their fuzzy first name and their last name. And then so once you have all your harmonized and then unified data, you can start to act on it, right? And by acting on it, it can be different things like, well, you can create some insights on it. You can use it for segmentation. You can even use any of your analytics tools. We have native connectors to Tableau, to CRM analytics, but you can, using a JDBC connector, you can also plug that into any, other BI tool as well. And then really, one thing is data cloud is going to drive a lot of your AI initiatives forward, especially as you look at Einstein Copilot Studio and some of the new capabilities like we just announced. So now data cloud can mean a lot of different things. And here's sort of like in terms of why use data cloud and what is not, right? So at a very high level, what it does, it lets you harmonize very disparate data sources. It unifies your profiles. It lets you segment on them and activate it on them. And then the value of it is, right, to be able to connect, ingest, and federate to how do you harmonize, unify, and federate. And then as well as you understanding your customers. Also want to call out to what data cloud is not. I mean, call out to Melissa here, like she helped together with the slide, but again, it's not an ETL tool. Even though we have some transformation capabilities, but it's not meant to be a full-blown ETL tool. It's not an MDM tool. Again, we will kind of get into that. Data Cloud creates what's called as a unified profile, and sometimes in your customer implementations, people have different perception for what an MDM should be. So it's not meant to create a golden record. It basically acts as a system of reference. And then it's not meant to be a BI tool. That's Tableau in the Salesforce portfolio, and it's not meant to be a backup or an archival tool. So that at a very high level, what is Data Cloud? And now I was going to sort of talk next about just maybe some use cases, right? So one of the things I'll say is, right, typically your end users are not out there asking for a data cloud, right? So unlike established, I mean, that is slowly changing, but unlike established categories like ERP, CRM, marketing, software, right? Your end users are not saying, are not saying, clamming to say, like, I need a data cloud, but there are a few trigger words, like if you hear them on why they would be good uh, candidates to kind of use data cloud, right? So if you hear them say, like, I want to increase my productivity, or I need easier and quicker access to customer data, or we are getting bogged down with bad data, or I want to, apply more automation, or getting a single view of my customer, or getting some intelligent insights, right? So those are all why um, in that scenario, it will be a good use case for implementing or using Data Cloud. Here is just some um, uh, an overview on for existing Salesforce customers who might be using other Salesforce clouds, on how they are using Data Cloud. So for Sales Cloud customers, they're using Data Cloud to improve forecasting and sales collaboration, right? So being able to give your exec a full view of your sales forecast across multiple orgs or multiple business units, being able to pass leads from one sales org or BU to another. For your service cloud customers, like we can call it, being able to provide very personalized and proactive customer service, right? So being, again, getting that single view of the customer, being able to monitor events and data points as they are coming, right? In this example, for example, knowing that to be able to anticipate data points coming in and deflect cases, to be able to predict the behavior, to offer assistance and recommendation. So these are how some of Salesforce customers today are using Data Cloud. And then for a marketing cloud customers, so just Data Cloud got its start in the marketing domain as a customer data platform. So really, you'll see a lot of use cases there in terms of how do I personalize my marketing, drive engagement, and really being able to segment more accurately and then be able to activate across the entire customer journey. So those are just some use cases in terms of how customers today are using Data Cloud across these clouds. Um, let's kind of talk about the technical architecture, right? Again, just kind of give you a view. Again, this is not something that you as architects would interact with, but this is sort of the overall architecture of how Data Cloud, a lot of the core capabilities I talked about, right? So if you look at it, Data Cloud is in our Hyperforce big data infrastructure, like we use Apache Spark, Presto, Iceberg tables, Airflow for some manipulation, but all of that you do through within Data Cloud itself. But this is just sort of giving you a behind the look scenes of what the underlying architecture looks like. Um, let's kind of talk about, right? So here's sort of giving you within the Salesforce universe, like you saw that more of that marketing side for how Data Cloud works, that sort of translates into this from an architecture lens perspective, right? So you have Data Cloud, and then you have all these different connectors from sales, service, and other orgs being able to connect to it. And then within Data Cloud itself, you're able to do some transformation, being able to run identity resolution, create your insights, and then trigger off data actions or do segmentation to kind of again call other systems, right? So this is what I would say is more of a master level architecture for what sort of an enterprise architecture looks like with Data Cloud. Let's look at now as you are the architects or developers in terms of what are those, what does the development architecture look like? And I might want to sort of drill down into a couple, right? So what does this diagram cover in sort of detail? So one is data is ingested into Data Cloud through all these connectors like from Salesforce CRM, B2C commerce, marketing cloud through our SDKs from your web and mobile data. We also have the ingestion API. And then, as I talked about, we also have BYOL, which you'll hear the term a bit more on, called Bring Your Own Lake, for doing that zero copy. And then your platform apps, and by platform apps, I mean apps that live within Salesforce core, right? Like core CRM. Typically, you would access the data in Data Cloud using through the Data Cloud Connect API through REST or Apex, as well as we also have a metadata API. Your external apps or web apps that don't use the Salesforce platform, basically accesses data through its own Data Cloud API, which is different from the Salesforce API that you might be used to. And then you can use the webhook to connect that data to external sort of cloud services as well, be it, AWS or Google Cloud, to be able to action on that. Other question we get is, I know Data Cloud is built on the Salesforce platform. You log into, like, what is the differentiation between what is Data Cloud versus what is Salesforce platform, right? So this is kind of giving you a view from more of an integration architecture perspective, right? So what Data Cloud has is, I think I thought we have the Connect API, which is more like how you would invoke that to the Salesforce platform to kind of query your REST resources, for using the being able to query data from Data Cloud, accessing the profile API, accessing your insights. And then we also have a Data Cloud API, which is outside of that, which is its own Data Cloud tenant, and that lives here. Again, it has the same capabilities. And then for those who are more hands-on or more of the developer, we also have a Connect API with an Apex process. So there is a subset of the overall REST API that has been exposed for Apex. So if you're building those Lightning Web components and you're writing Apex classes, you can access them directly there. And then last but not the least, you have data actions within Data Cloud is how you can start to orchestrate or automate being able to send that, through within the Salesforce core platform through platform events. But you can also, we now also have a data action to Marketing Cloud to be able to add them in a journey, to be able to send out an email, as well as a webhook as well to talk to any external system. By the way, like, I know it's a small audience, so feel free to ask questions as I'm going through this. Now let's kind of talk about best practices as I look at the Data Cloud life cycle. What does that look like? So you've seen this slide before, and I'm going to cover about how do you get data in and how do you connect it. So if you remember our earlier enterprise architecture slide, so when you talk about connecting and ingesting, you're basically interacting with these components, right? So it can be your any website, whether it's powered by Experience Cloud or any other website or your mobile app, and then you have connectors to all the Salesforce Cloud, Salesforce, Sales Org, Service Org, your B2C Commerce, Marketing Cloud, and then your first-party system and third-party system as well through the ingestion API, as well as Snowflake, now also through Databricks as well for data federation. And then we also have connectors to our hyperscalers, in this case, AWS, like an S3 bucket, right? So even though it's a complex architecture, when you're talking about ingestion, basically these are the components that come into play. So let's kind of talk about some just best practices, right? So from a data ingestion standpoint, I would say before ingesting, and especially as you're starting in maybe in implementation or trying to use Data Cloud, like we say, inventory and investigate all of your data sources, right? So investigate them for the quantity, quality, and completeness. And honestly, build out a data dictionary for each source that's being that you're planning to add into Data Cloud. I mean, I would say one key message here is like understand the system of record for each of your data sources, you know? And then, because quite often you'll find there's some source data overlap, establish your data governance, and that's going to help you in your implementation as well as in your adoption journey. So once you are bringing all the data in and it's, it's within Data Cloud, like I talked about harmonization again, that is how do you map to a standard data model? And then if you look at it, right, within Data Cloud, harmonization is basically this step where you have your data that's coming in basically lands in what we call as a DLO, a data lake object, and then you map it to a DMO, data model object. So the harmonization is basically through clicks no code where you're doing that mapping step, and then even though, again, complex enterprise architecture diagram, the things that come into play are basically those components. Oh. I think
hey, Arvind, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Can you drill in a little bit more on the difference between a DLO and a DMO and what the difference is? And
yeah, and I think you have set me up perfectly, So yes, I will do that. What slide was I on? My Chrome browser decided to do a little. All right. So we talked about DLO. That's my next slide for you, So you will hear all these terms, like DSO, DLO, and DMO. So what does it mean? So DSO is basically the data source object. That's your source data, right? It can be a CSV file, it can be a JSON blob, it can be a Parquet. It's typically in your cloud storage provider or in your source system. And then the first time it lands within Data Cloud is it basically lands in what we call as a DLO, which is a data lake object. So these are basically schema enforced. They are Parquet formatted iceberg tables. Again, not something that you would ever interact with from a underlying, but just good to know. And they are typed, right? So when you are creating a data, or when you're creating a data lake object through a data stream, you're basically saying what type it is. Is it a profile or an engagement type? And that has ramifications downstream. So basically, the first time the data lands in Data Cloud is in a DLO, which is a data lake object. And then you have what's called as a DMO, a data model object. So what is a data model object? Basically, this is where you're mapping your source data or data in your DLO into your DMO. So a DMO is nothing else but a non-materialized view of the mappings that you have specified, So it's typically, now they can be materialized is when you create insights or unified profile, because that's data that we are crunching through. Just a tip is like data first must be mapped from a DLO to a DMO in order for you to use it downstream for segmentation, for analytics, for activation, So basically, typically DLO is where the data lands, and once you map the data, it's in a DMO, and DMO is what you are interacting with on a day in, day out basis. So, so this screen basically this is just sort of showing you a screenshot of that whole mapping process. On the left hand side is where you have your DLOs, and then your right hand side is where your DMO. And through clicks no code, you are mapping that out. You're saying, okay, this field needs to be in this, and you are basically telling it what that mapping process looks like. I see we have a hand raised. I think I saw something pop up.
Hey, Arvind. Rohit here.
Hey, Rohit.
So Arvind, just here, like from DLO to DMO, in between, if I need to harmonize. So let's say I have three tables in my data lake, and I'm pulling the data, and before mapping into my data model object, right? Before that, I want to harmonize. So can I do that?
Um, the harmonization is the process of mapping it from your DLO to your DMO. That is
DMO.
what harmonization is. If you want to do some transformations, you can. So using a batch transform, streaming transforms on your DLO, you can do some transformation. The output of the transformation would be another DLO. But within Data Cloud, when we say harmonization, it's basically strictly this mapping process. That's called a harmonization.
So I'm little confused here. So like in the DLO, before bringing the data into DLO, uh, I will do the harmonization, or after that I will do the harmonization if I need.
Uh, yeah, so DLO is basically the process by which when you're saying this birth date field in my ecom customer profile,
Yes.
DLO is mapped to my individual birthday.
Mhm.
That click path when you're doing that is basically harmonization. So it is
Okay.
the DLO to DMO mapping that you are
Mhm.
creating is basically harmonization, you know? So in this case, I just have one example here, but say that you have multiple, you know, DLOs and they all get mapped into the individual object. So that's the whole process of why we say harmonization. I mean, it's nothing more than data modeling or data mapping.
Mapping. Got it. Thank you.
And once you harmonize, basically what you get is this, like, you know, once you, it basically gives you a very graphical view of your data model very holistically, where you can see how all your objects have been mapped, what those relationships are, you know, that you can start to use. But then again, before you map your data, right? Again, this is more from an implementation perspective. What are some of the best practices, right? So we call it establish, assess, and plan. And what we mean, so the data cloud data model is highly normalized, you know? So the data needs to be normalized before it can be mapped. So you need to make sure that you're aligning your data with the customer 360 data model. So, I mean, a case in point is say that you have one file coming in one row, but there are three different phone numbers in that one row, but you need to map that into three different times into the contact point. So you need to decide if I'll do my transformation in my source system or do I do it in data cloud using streaming transforms and batch transforms. So those are some of those design considerations you need to make, right? So again, you need to establish how will you transform and map your source data. You also need to plan out, right? And you know, and oftentimes I would say even before you are in the tool, like do a cursory mapping in a spreadsheet or in some other tool in terms of so have a plan in mind. And again, my only recommendation here is like this. This is a very key part. Like take your time with this part, right? Like do not rush into pushing the buttons and data cloud. So anything to refactor that just takes that whole lot longer. Um, all right. So
Arvind,
once you,
can I ask a quick question, Arvind?
yeah, please
You had
do.
mentioned a couple slides ago that I think you said a DMO is like a non-materialized view, but you had
Yeah,
mentioned that there may be situations where you may have a materialized view.
yeah,
Can you kind of talk through
yeah,
like why you would have one, what the difference is, and then why
yeah.
you would have one or the other?
So this is so right here itself. This process when you do this is a non-materialized view right here. You're not you only materialize it. So when you are creating a calculated insight. When you create a calculated insight, that's going through the data cloud infrastructure. It is churning, and the output of that is something called as a CIO table, or which looks like a DMO. So at that point, that data is within that. Other times it might be a materialized is when you're running identity resolution, the output of that is a unified profile table, right? So that is, where data is showing we have done some computation and the output of that lives in a DMO.
Okay. And I assume when we're talking about non-materialized view and materialized view, like at the basic level, materialized view is we're physically writing the data to data cloud. Non-materialized view is like a virtualization of the data from somewhere else.
So non-materialized view is, this is your, on the left-hand side is your DLO. So that if you change the first name value, it'll be reflected instantaneously within your DMO because there's no data being
I got you.
copied back and forth,
Yep.
That makes sense.
Thank you.
Sure. Now that you have your harmonized data, you can start to unify them, right? So again, within this enterprise architecture, where does unification live? And it's basically this step right here. So that blue box, when we run identity resolution, the output of that is basically it creates a unified profile or a unified account or a unified individual or unified account, what we call a unified profile. So that's where that lives. And basically the output of that unified is when you are running it, it's basically based on the match rules that you specify. It's finding it's finding common individuals based on the rules that you specify. So in this case, we have gone down from about 65 million source profiles to about 30.3 million source profiles, and it's based on exact name and email. It kind of tells you. And the power of the unified profile then is really that you get that very holistic, richer, single view of that customer, right? In this case, this is the data cloud or within your CRM instance that where the record has been enhanced using data from data cloud. And again, I'll be saying these are not standard components out of the box. Typically, they have been customized to some Lightning Web components, but the raw data is there, like for you to access as needed. Um, one of the things as we talk about data cloud is it comes of our system of reference versus system of record. Again, within data cloud, think of it as a system of reference. And what I mean by that is we always maintain source lineage and you always maintain a referential access back to your source data, right? So a few things, right? And that's why we say data cloud is not meant to be used as an MDM, right? Again, MDM is very different. There are a lot of aspects of data cloud that overlap with what an MDM does, but there are also some aspects where data cloud, like the way it works is different. It works as a system of reference. So like we do not merge records, right? Each record continue to exist, but it's linked and it's independent. In my 3 years, I guess one of the most common questions I've got is within data cloud after the identity resolution process runs, it basically creates something called the unified individual ID or a unified account ID. And I would say if anything is one thing you want to remember from this slide of the session is do not use that as your golden record ID. Again, that value can change. That is, if you change some of your source data, if you change your identity resolution match rules, right? So, and that's why I say data cloud is not meant to be used as a MDM system. Does that make sense? All right, so let's look at some unification or some identity resolution best practices, right? Again, evaluate your enterprise unification strategy. I would say be very intentional with match rules, right? So like typically, like again, matching on just the contact point, in this case, email address, right? It's not a recommended best practice, right? So I mean, you should consider the impact of shared email, shared phone numbers, right? For unification purposes. Also, review what are your business goals for your unification. And again, when we get asked this, like there is no really optimal match rate or consolidation rate. A lot of it depends, right? different by industry, by your data, by your different scenario. And we just know that the more permissive the match criteria, you will have a higher consolidation rate, and the reverse as well, right? So there are more restrictive you have, the more rules you specify, the less consolidation. So there is no magic like this is the ideal consolidation rate, right? It really comes down to your data. And then within Data Cloud itself, we let you create multiple identity graphs or multiple rule sets so you can test and match in terms of by changing my rules, does my match rate improve, decrease, does it change, you know? And then just is like within Data Cloud, we have this concept of the party identification DMO. I would say understand that as an architect, like typically that's what you would use when you want to match on some third-party identifier like driver's license, loyalty, you know, and it has, you know, like we kind of spell out in terms of how that works. So now that you have your harmonized unified data, that you can start to act on it, right? And again, we talked about, but there are different ways to get value from your data as well as activate your data, right? So, you know, typically in the past, when Data Cloud was in the marketing domain, the main use case was around segmentation and activation, right? But now, as a Data Cloud, there is just so much more. So like analytics and insight, right? So first is being just able to apply analytics and insights in your data, right? So using Data Cloud reports and dashboard, which works very similar to CRM reports and dashboards. So all of your DLOs, DMOs, you can start to create reports on them. Being able to create calculated insights to find trends or multidimensional metrics on them. And then also being able to use like data sharing to, you know, through like to Snowflake, Databricks, Redshift, BigQuery, and then analytics also through Tableau and CRM analytics. So that's one way to get value from your data. Second is just being able to act on it, right? From a segmentation and activation standpoint, like you can start to use things like data actions that as you couple that with a platform event, you can really start to orchestrate, you know, more powerful automations in the Salesforce platform. And then we just recently launched some newer capabilities like CRM enrichments, right? Something called copy fields where you can copy the data from Data Cloud back into CRM. And then we just launched Data Cloud triggered flow. So for those who are, you know, like who've been working with Flow, now all of your Data Cloud DMOs is accessible as a native object that you can use within Salesforce Flow itself in the same org. And then the other way to get value from your data is using some of the ML or AI or the machine learning capabilities, right? So where this is, it can be for your low code, like using an Einstein Studio Model Builder, where you can create prescriptive models using clicks no code, or for your pro code builder, like you can use external workbenches like SageMaker, Vertex. You cannot build a model there and seamlessly integrate that into Data Cloud. Last but not the least, which I think often gets overlooked, one more way to act on your data and to get value is to be able to just consume it, right? And by that, what do I mean? Like we have Lightning Web components, we have our APIs, like the query API, the profile API, and data graph, as well as CRM enrichment through related lists. And the reason I bring this up, a very common scenario is I'm a Service Cloud user, like I want to see a list of all my unified cases for a contact, right? You know, if your first instant like might be from Data Cloud, how do I activate the data? How do I copy that into my CRM, right? If your perspective is strictly from a display perspective, search and display, there is not really a reason for that data to actually live in an S object, right? So as long as you're within CRM, you can access the data from the contact, and every time that record is getting pulled up in the service console, your sales console, you are basically giving them a view. So even consuming data cloud is also a way in terms of how do you get value from it, you know? So this is sort of, again, what those different pieces of acting on your data are, right? So here you have your insights, you can create data actions here, and then which can trigger platform events that can be consumed in other orgs through Salesforce Flow. You also have segmentation and activation. And then, analytics on the right-hand side through our Tableau connector and some of the accelerators that like we have there. Here's just sort of giving you a view on how a data cloud record within CRM has been enriched and has been made powerful using sort of data cloud, right? So this is, again, you're in your sales console, but now this span here is basically all of your calculated insights, right? They're either being used from a display perspective or using the copy field capability. This is showing you your leads and accounts across your different Salesforce orgs, right? To using a related list. This is showing you your product usage from like a bring your own lake, in this case, like to BigQuery. And then here you have all of your engagement data from Data Cloud. And by engagement, like I mean any of your like click events, support calls, like what we term as engagement are being displayed here. One of the things I did, since these are Salesforce, you guys are Salesforce architects, I want to talk about is the concept of now you can apply like change data capture, through Data Cloud, and how does it work? So basically, as data is coming in, so any inserts, any updates, any changes can trigger a data action, right? And basically, from a Data Cloud, the way it works is that your incoming data is coming in, we create a snapshot, and then when the platform event is fired, we give you both the previous value and the new value. Like, and now we have some sample Apex classes for how you pass them out and use them in your Salesforce flow through a invocable Apex if needed. Okay, I see we have a hand up, so it's a good point to ask her,
Hello, Arvind. Thank you
Yes.
so much. It was such an interesting session. A quick question on the zero copy. If you go back to the slide where you were talking about, DSO to DLO to DMO, under the DLO, I remember seeing, Salesforce data gets actually copied, right, to your physical storage in your Parquet files. So just help me understand this. So whenever I'm trying to view a record, or whenever I'm requesting for a record, I go all the way to that physical storage to my Parquet file and retrieve it from there. Is that right? Is that the only physical place where my record is getting copied?
I mean, so again, there are different, so I'm not, so this is not about BYOL, which I will cover now, but like in the case of, say you're ingesting a contact stream from different CRM orgs, right? So those you will bring in through your CRM connector. It'll create different contact DLOs, and then you will actually map that to your individual object, right? Yes. But
Correct.
when you're viewing, I mean, the fact is it is Parquet iceberg. I mean, that's something, it's sort of, that's an abstraction layer for you, yeah. But within Data Cloud itself, it is on a, unlike CRM, which is like S object, which is based
Correct.
on the back end, it's the Oracle SQL. Data Cloud is a very different infrastructure. It's in Hyperforce. So yeah, so when the DLO is the first place that the data is physically coming into the Data Cloud infrastructure.
Okay. So then what do you mean when you say zero copy?
Yeah, so now let's do that. And that's why I have a thought, I actually just added this in as a last minute because we announced earlier this week our BYOL, like we just went GA. And I think this is very important for architects because this is a new paradigm and it's been the rage in the industry as well, like more broadly, right? So when we say BYOL, zero ETL, bring your own lake, like you will hear these terms being thrown interchangeably around. What does it mean, right? So this is both from a data in and a data out perspective, right? So like as to the why, right? So traditional ETL, by ETL I mean extract and transform load, has its challenges. There is cost involved. There is maintainability. You have to build your own pipeline. As you talk about data freshness. And then if any schema changes, it can break, right? So basically, ETL, the traditional ETL that we've been doing for the last 20 plus years, even longer, like works great, but also has its own challenges, and has like you create both sometimes technical debt and others. So what a data cloud is launching a different way in terms of how do we integrate data, right? So from traditional methods is like it's outside of your trust grounds. There were latency involved. It could be error prone. You have to maintain it, right? So zero ETL, which is secure exchange, real time data. It's trusted and it's more cost efficient, right? So what does it mean? So when you say bring your own lake with Salesforce Data Cloud, it's basically a bidirectional state, a bidirectional framework for both data in, which we call as data federation, as well as data out, which is also data sharing, right? So in this case, right now, there are 4 providers that we support this with, which is Snowflake, Google BigQuery, Databricks, Redshift, and same on the outbound side as well, right? So how does it work, right? So zero ETL data federation, so this is more in the case of data in, right? So this is sort of giving you an architecture. So all of your source data still lives in your Snowflake instance, still lives in your data lake instance, sorry, in your database instance. And basically when you create this within data cloud, there's what we create is something called as a virtual DLO. So it's a virtual data lake object. It looks like a normal DLO. It acts like a normal DLO with some caveats, and then basically whenever you are viewing that data within data cloud through either data explorer or doing a query on it, we are doing a live query at that point back into Snowflake, back into Databricks to kind of give you that view, right? So in this case, the data doesn't land in the virtual DLO, the actual raw data is still within your Snowflake tenant, still within your Databricks tenant. The only point at which it comes into Data Cloud is when at that point you say, you know what, I want to run an insights on it. I want to use that for my identity resolution ransom, or I want to segment on it the output of that. At that point, the data will get computed and will make its way into the data cloud infrastructure. Just one caveat there is within your data federation data, and we also have the concept of like an accelerated DLO. That is, you can choose to specify that I want this virtual DLO to be accelerated. Now, what that basically means is we start to cache that, right, for the performance reason, but that's a choice that you make, right? So that's the only caveat in terms of how that. And I see there's a hand up as well from Rabi. Rabi, good seeing you here. Yeah,
Yeah,
go
hi.
for it.
Hi, Arvind. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Hey, this is very interesting, and I think I raised my hand a little early. I heard about the caching, so that makes sense. My question is DLO, DMO, and then your unified, data graph, right? Or, well, unified data graph and DMO might go together. With zero copy, without caching, does the data still get into the unified data graph, or does it remain external?
Yes, no, yes, it does, because when you run an identity resolution rule set, when you do that match rules, the output of that is what we call as a, it's basically the unified individual table, and there are the unified link tables and some other tables, but that is a data cloud. So the output of the identity resolution is basically those unified records. So at that point, the data isn't, data cloud, correct?
Okay. And one more follow-up. In terms of practical features, right? Implementation features, is there any loss if we go with the zero copy, bring your own data lake kind of approach?
Yeah, that's a good question. And in fact, it is spelled out. So there are like things meant, like for example, data actions, like change data capture, right? So when you say, whenever my first name record is updated or my platinum status is updated, do this. With the external virtual DLO to use that won't work the same way because the data is not in Salesforce. Now, there are some options how you can apply. That's one. Like, I don't think streaming transform works with BYOL. Like, if you look at our help documentation, it kind of will list out what's supported versus what's not,
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And then the same thing, this is on the outbound side, like how do I use my
Hey, Arvind.
unified data?
Hey, sorry
Yes.
to interrupt. There was just a question in the chat. Stuart had a question about support for Kafka as a input.
We don't, you know what? Okay, but
Through MuleSoft, the MuleSoft connector.
Yeah. So we don't have a native connected to Kafka. So the only way to get data into Data Cloud is through our connectors that we have. To kind of her point, as long as you can make the data available through MuleSoft, through other means, we can ingest it in, but we don't have a native connector to that. Also, just for your reference, the MuleSoft connector itself, behind the scene, it uses the ingestion API. So, anything that you can do with the ingestion API, you can do with the MuleSoft connector as well. But MuleSoft basically abstracts that to an API first sort of fix no code type approach, But I know I've heard it's on a roadmap, like we use Kafka for some, our own internal infrastructure, but right now there is not saying, hey, source data plug into this Kafka stream for me. I think I just have a couple of more slides left, if I'm not mistaken. So this is the same thing on the data outside. That is, now that you have all your data in Data Cloud, your unified profiles, your insight, how do I make it accessible to my Snowflake, to my Databricks? And the same thing there. Within, if you're used to Snowflake, when you log in there, within Data Cloud, you create something called as a data share. And that data is in Data Cloud, but now within Snowflake, you can start to write your Snowflake query across your Snowflake tables and your Data Cloud tables to to ingest that or to analyze that. And then a question, I think I have a couple more, right? So I'm going to show here, like, I want you guys all to memorize this. No, I'm kidding, but there are, there are different case points. There are different connectors for Data Cloud in terms of the ingress side, the way that you're bringing data in. On the egress side, how do you get data out through activation? Each one has its own in terms of what does the refresh frequency look like? Like, is it real time, near real time, or is it 15 minutes or every hour, right? So I guess, again, all of this, I think my goal here is, as an architect, you should understand the different connectors that exist, as well as the timing considerations, right? For both ingress and egress, as well as what is real time versus near real time versus batch versus federated, right? And again, always look at our help documentation. Like, for example, the ingestion API used to be every 15 minutes. Now I think it's a lot more quicker as well. So we're constantly investing a lot in that area. All right. Now, Gaurav, this like now that you've learned, like, data cloud is a very big investment for Salesforce. So how do you sort of, become a data cloud architect? Like I will share this deck afterwards. These are all clickable links as well, but basically we have a really good trail mix and trailhead. And in fact, I think just last month we launched our first hands-on module project for data cloud, which will let you basically create a data stream, create a formula field, and actually map to it. And then you can basically, there is another trail mix for how do you prep for your data cloud credential. And then you basically can take the data cloud consultant certification. Like our team help write a lot of those questions. So again, it's not hard, but at the same time, it's not like definitely spend the time preparing for it. Like it's, and there's lots of different scenario-based questions. So it's good. And then I think we have some time for Q&A. And I think I saw some questions with a hand raised or pop up. Awesome. Good question about the development and deployment architecture. Yeah, so that's an easy, so right now, the way that you package up that, so unlike your core CRM, Data Cloud does not support sandboxes yet. And I say that because Safe Harbor, I hear it's coming in summer or later, but the way it'll work is going to be different, so keep an eye on that. But right now, the way it is done is you typically would need an additional data cloud environment that you will use as a QA or a sandbox. And the way that you move configurations is either through packaging. So you can use your normal Salesforce packaging, and then within data cloud itself, there's a concept of data kits, which is a term that's very specific to data cloud in terms of how do you move configurations between different environments. So right now, based on GA capabilities that we have today, the way that you would is basically getting an additional environment and then using data kits or packaging to be able to move those configurations back in.
If I may add here, Arvind, everybody's Bogdan here. It's actually suggested by Salesforce. You could use data spaces, a little bit more expensive, but you could use a data space as a sandbox because there is separation of data, almost at physical level, if I'm not mistaken. And yes, your pre-prod to prod transition can be with what Arvind said, use data kits or just manually, I guess, recreate some of the integrations.
Hey, Bogdan, nice to see you here as well. He's one of our members of our PAB as well, so thank you for that. No, but I was going to say, yes, based on who you talk to, if you talk to a sandbox PM itself, the one who's driving, data spaces is not meant to be a sandbox that it's meant to be the logical partition of data. Now, I know some customers are using it, but I know from a product standpoint, that's not a recommended path. But there's nothing stopping you from doing it.
It's a hack. I agree. I was trying to be creative while we wait for the real thing.
Yeah. So just bear in mind that it's coming. And again, if you're just now starting this journey, look at options. But yeah, we didn't touch on data spaces here, but it's a different way in terms of how data cloud enforces logical partitioning for different business units. Like it's not meant to be a security tool. It's just more of a logical partition, but that's an option as well.
Arvind, Jay had a question in the chat about data cloud versus enterprise data warehouse, what the differences are.
I mean, I'm sure that, I think it depends. I mean, it's like we partner with data warehouses as well, but it's not, I mean, I would say data cloud is again an enterprise data lake, right? It's like data warehouses so I think there might be, again, it comes on to what is the use case of what the customer is trying to do. Like it's not a straightforward answer saying yes or no, or we don't. So there might be some capabilities that work very similarly, some don't, right? I mean, and if you kind of look at it, like why did Salesforce go about trying to build data cloud? Right? Apart from the fact that single view of a customer, the fact is, as you know, CRM has been around for a long time. Amazing product with the metadata infrastructure. I'm a CRM architect myself, but it's not used like if you look like I want to bring in all my website data, mobile data, like S object is not geared towards that, right? It is the fact is so data is a very different. It's a hyperscale infrastructure data, right? It's like a data lake. So again, a lot of the data warehouses I know using like star schema, but it's a very SQL based, sort of infrastructure. So it's different. So I would say if I was, you as an architect, I would try to sort of drill down on what the use case is, right? Again, as you look at these broader industry terms that's been around for 10 plus years, sometimes people have different optics and perceptions on what that means. So that's why when I hear the terms MDM, EDW, trying to what is it that the customer is trying to do, or what is it that your organization is trying to do, and then figure out what makes sense in terms of what capabilities of data cloud, and not just data cloud, right? Like for example, I say this data cloud, even though it has some transformation capabilities, do not use it as an ETL tool. We have batch transform, cleaning transform. You can do a lot with it. Within the Salesforce suite, your ETL tool like is going to be MuleSoft, right? Again, you can same thing with analytics, right? Like Data Cloud can now through reports and dashboards, you can create some analytics. But within the Salesforce, it'll be Tableau or CRMA, right? So I think also knowing what Data Cloud plays good at and where like it's going to drive success in your organization.
Arvind, we had a couple, I won't read them up, but we had a couple more questions in the chat from Janine and from Jay.
So I will cover Janine's first. I see, can I use it to facilitate avoid an org move? So I think a very common use scenario is like, like we know, like a lot of Salesforce customers have more than one org, just need of the business. So in fact, Data Cloud is a very common scenario to be able to use that to consolidate the data and give them that unified view, right? So yeah, that's a very, again, if there might be other reasons why they might do an org migration or org move, that's right. But Data Cloud can be used to get data from multiple orgs to kind of give you that unified view.
Okay, this is more of a tech debt avoidance scenario, but I can use it for that. That's what you're saying.
Yes, I mean, in fact, if you look, as you know, or as you may know, back in Dreamforce, we launched what we call a free data cloud. That is all customers who are enterprise edition and above can get started with Data Cloud for absolutely free. Data Cloud works on a credits-based system, unlike some of your CRM, which is user pricing. So you should get used to that. So you get some started credits to sort of start with, but that's a very common use case where I just want to unify lead records or my cases across multiple CRM orgs.
Yeah, this might be kind of complex. It has to do with CPQ, but might have to give you a call offline and talk about it.
Somebody's asked, does Data Cloud data change event get triggered on DLO? If so, action. That's okay. I'm trying to think. I think it's on the DMO, if I'm not mistaken. But as I mentioned, DMO itself is a non-materialized view. So if your data is changing in your DLO, DMO will instantly recognize that and be able to act on it, right? So I think you do need to harmonize it to be able to use and act on it. And then somebody asked a question about any insight about cost and use of initial credits. Yeah, so I think with free Data Cloud, you get 250,000 credits. Some of the Dreamforce slides you may have seen kind of have some reference. And what we have seen is with those 20,000 credits, you can solve up to 1 to 2 different use cases. I think you can unify up to 10,000 different profiles. You can run some insights on them. So yeah, so that initial credit can, just based on just, being able to get data into the CRM connector, thus credits will let you deploy a use case or two up to about 10,000 profiles. All right.
Hey, thanks, Arvind, for all these insights.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, happy to.
Hey, Arvind, one more thing, like whenever you get a time, so like on the Slack channel, I saw a lot of questions and other things. So I hope you are going to share this deck and link to connect on Slack channel for data cloud troubleshooting.
Sure. Yeah. What Slack channel is this, and who's like?
No, you created
yeah.
that Slack channel, right?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So that's for our partners, and yeah. So we have a team. I think we've close to about 5,000-6,000 people there.
Yep.
Awesome. Are there any other questions before we break? No. And Arvind, a couple. Would it be possible to share the deck with us so we can distribute it out to the folks on this call?
Yes, I will share it to. I have her on Slack, Melissa on Slack. Give me till, I will get it to her by sometime tomorrow.
Oh yeah. No rush.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then actually, I've had people just me as well. Like, if as and when you guys do get the recording of this and get posted, just let me know as well, so I can share that out to the folks who have asked me. So
Awesome. Yeah, we'll share the recording out. We'll share the slides. Zach, before we break, did you have anything else?
Nope, no other questions.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you all.
Well, thanks so much, Arvind. This was awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Okay.
Dick. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.